Hi, I'm Sophia Harris. My mother handed me a faded dress and said, "You're marrying him, no more questions." Her words still burn. The same tone she used when she dismissed my college dreams as unnecessary for a girl like me. I didn't even know his last name. I didn't even get a cake with my name on it. They called it a wedding, but it felt more like a funeral. And just when they thought they'd gotten rid of me, I learned the man they forced on me was richer than everyone in that room combined. So, here's what really happened, and why I never said goodbye. Have you ever been told where you belong by people who never knew your worth? Tell me, where you're watching from. I read every single comment. The morning my mother handed me the dress, it was still damp at the hem. A shapeless yellowish thing with sleeves that didn't match and a neckline that sat wrong like it had been sewn in a hurry by someone who didn't like me very much. She didn't look me in the eye when she said it. "You're marrying that man next week. No more arguments." She'd barked the same order when she forced me to quit my tutoring job to care for Aunt Marion, claiming family duty trumped my ambitions. That was it. No. How do you feel? No. Are you ready? Not even a congrats, just an order disguised as a blessing. I was 29, but in her tone I was still a child, a burden she couldn't wait to shove into someone else's arms. My father sat in his recliner, as he always did, eyes glazed over the local newspaper like it held more importance than the life I was about to be thrown into. The only sound in the room was the ceiling fan clicking slightly out of rhythm. That and the soft snicker from my sister Clara, who didn't even try to hide her smirk. "Don't forget to wash your hair," she said. "You don't want to scare him off." Her taunt echoed the time she'd sneered at my thrift store prom dress, calling it pitiful in front of our cousins. I stood there holding the dress, still damp, still unwanted, like it might start dripping all the disappointments I'd been taught to swallow over the years. Growing up, I had been the quiet one, the obedient one, the one who said, "Okay, Mama," and "Yes, Daddy," even when it hurt. I gave up a full-ride scholarship to stay home and take care of Aunt Marion when she got sick. My sister got to finish school, move away, live her own life. I stayed behind in the crumbling house with paint peeling off the porch columns and dreams peeling off my ribs. In this family, silence was mistaken for gratitude. I didn't say anything when Mama handed me off like an old shoe. I didn't say anything when she said, "This is where girls like you belong." It was the same phrase she'd used when she refused to let me apply for a $5,000 0-cent scholarship, insisting I'd never amount to anything anyway, as if I were being returned to the factory with a discount sticker slapped on my soul. The man, Nathan, had come around twice, once to fix the church's plumbing, once to drop off a donation basket. I knew nothing about him except that he worked landscaping and didn't talk much. That was good enough for them. A quiet man for a quiet girl, no questions asked. The wedding happened 3 days later. It was held in the small community chapel where the carpet smelled like mildew and the pews creaked like they were crying. There were no flowers, no music, no smiling cousins from out of town, just the pastor looking half asleep and a handful of silent onlookers who came more out of habit than celebration. Someone handed out a folded paper program. My name was misspelled on the front. Sophie Harris. I'd pointed it out to Mama. She glanced, shrugged. It doesn't matter anymore. She'd dismissed my name before, like when she left me off the family Christmas card, claiming it was too crowded. Doesn't matter anymore. No speech, no toast, no photographs, just a nod from the pastor and a "you may go now." That sounded more like a sentence than a blessing. After we signed the license, I heard Mama lean toward Clara, her whisper sliding through the stale air like a blade. Thank God we finally got rid of her. It wasn't the first time. She'd whispered the same relief when I moved out at 18, saying I was, finally, someone else's problem. And that was that. No hug, no ride home. "No, we'll miss you." They watched as I climbed into Nathan's dusty pickup truck, the door groaning as I pulled it shut. My white dress, cheap, borrowed, too tight around the arms, wrinkled under the seatbelt as he started the engine. We didn't speak. The gravel road stretched out like a scar between the church and the rest of the world. I held on to my purse, though it barely held anything. No phone, no wallet, just a single handkerchief. White cotton with a stitched letter S in one corner. Aunt Marion gave it to me before she passed. She always said, no matter what they take from you, keep something with your name on it. I clenched it in my fist as the truck rattled forward, kicking up red dirt behind us. I looked out the window but didn't see anything. Not the trees, not the mailboxes, not the sky. I just kept hearing Mama's voice. "This is where girls like you belong." I wanted to cry, but I wouldn't. Not in front of this stranger I was now legally tied to. Not in the dress someone else picked. Not because they'd won. No, if I was going to cry, it would be in silence. And later. Nathan drove with both hands on the wheel, eyes fixed ahead. He wasn't unkind, just unreadable. I wondered what he thought of me. I wondered if he knew I had no choice. I wondered if he even cared. I wanted to ask him, "Do you think I deserve this?" But I couldn't form the words. Instead, I sat still, let the ride take me, and counted the turns in the road like they were stitches I could one day pull loose. And that was the day I buried my voice in a wedding dress I didn't choose. And I didn't say another word for the next 6 hours. The truck rattled down the narrow roads that wound through woods and forgotten farmland. The hum of the tires against gravel was the only sound between us. I sat stiffly in the passenger seat, staring out at moss-covered trees that blurred past in slow motion. He drove steadily, eyes on the road, hands resting firmly at 10 and 2. Nathan, my husband. We hadn't said more than 12 words to each other. I didn't know what town we were headed to. Didn't ask. I wasn't ready to care yet. He glanced at me once, then back at the road. Not with pity, just curiosity. It reminded me of Clara's cold stare when she'd mocked my $200 0-cents wedding dress as second-hand trash. Maybe like he was trying to figure out what kind of storm he'd just married into. This wasn't a honeymoon. This was exile. Hours passed and the trees gave way to signs of life. Low fences, tidy lawns, pastel shutters on small homes. Portland, Oregon. I caught the name on a road sign just as the sun dipped below the horizon. He pulled into a driveway behind a larger whitewashed house and parked beside a small guest cottage, tucked into a garden that smelled faintly of rosemary and rain. The porch light was on. The steps had no cracks. The windows were clean. I expected mildew and neglect. Instead, I found lavender and silence. Nathan stepped out first, walked around, and opened my door without saying anything. I followed him inside, clutching my purse like it was the only thing I had left from the girl I used to be. The guest house had just one bedroom, a small living room, and a galley kitchen. Everything looked secondhand but cared for. Folded towels, swept floor, dishes drying neatly in a rack. A faint hum of a ceiling fan stirred the warm air. "You can take the bed," he said. "I'll sleep out here if that's all right." He didn't wait for a reply, just moved past me and opened a drawer, pulling out a few tools. Then he knelt in front of a crooked cabinet door and began tightening the hinge. The quiet was disorienting. Not the tense kind I grew up with, filled with glares and guilt, but gentle, like the kind that gives a person space to breathe. He cooked something simple: eggs, toast, and a slice of avocado. I waited for him to say grace or hand me a plate. Instead, he just said, "There's water in the fridge. You don't need to talk if you don't want to." I sat at the table. I ate. And for the first time in days, maybe longer, my breath came steady, not like a gasp for survival, more like air I was allowed to take. He fixed that cabinet. Then he folded a dish towel. Then he stepped outside without a word. I stayed in that chair, fork idle on my plate, staring out the window where dusk was painting the sky bruised purple. Later that night, after I showered and changed into an old t-shirt he'd left folded on the bed, I turned on my phone. Just one message from my mother. "Don't come back. It's done. We've moved on." It was the same finality she'd used when she sold my childhood bedroom furniture without telling me. 8 words. Not even punctuation, not even a love mom. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone or scream or ask why. I just powered it off and set it face down on the nightstand. They cut the cord so cleanly I wondered if I ever mattered at all. I laid on the edge of the bed, too tired to get under the covers, still half-dressed, with that stitched handkerchief pressed into my palm like a rosary. My mind kept expecting something bad to happen. A knock on the door, a shouted insult, a slammed cabinet. But none of that came. The room was cool. The sheets smelled like sunlight. I didn't dream of flowers or forgiveness that night. I didn't dream at all. I just slept, and that was enough. By morning, the sun had poured into the room like warm milk. I sat up slowly, the ache in my body less sharp than it had been. My eyes burned, but they were dry. The smell of toast reached me before I stepped out of the bedroom. On the kitchen table sat a plate of scrambled eggs and buttered toast. Steam still rose from the mug of coffee next to it. Nathan was outside, standing barefoot in the small patch of garden behind the house. He was watering the tomato plants with slow, even movements, like it was something sacred. For a moment, I just watched him. The way he moved with purpose but no rush. No heavy sighs, no tension in his shoulders. Just a man and a hose and the quiet earth. I stepped onto the porch. "Thank you," I said, my voice a little hoarse from sleep or disuse. "You don't owe me anything," he replied, setting the watering can down. "Eat while it's warm." I stood there another second, then turned back toward the table. My stomach growled. But something else stirred, too. Something deeper. A kindness I couldn't place yet, but maybe, just maybe, I would. I sat with the plate in front of me, steam rising softly off the toast. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until the smell hit. Eggs, pepper, butter just starting to cool. But it wasn't just the food. It was the note. Folded neatly beside the fork, written in simple ballpoint ink. "Saw yours was running low." A new bottle of shampoo sat next to it on the table. Something inside me paused. He hadn't asked if I needed it. He hadn't asked if he could buy it. He just noticed. Noticed without comment, without needing praise, without making it feel like a transaction. It was unlike Ruth's grudging gifts, always laced with reminders of my debt to the family. Still, my fingers hovered over the note longer than I expected. It's hard to trust gentle hands when the last ones left bruises I had to cover with makeup. I pushed the plate gently to one side, stood, and walked to the window. He was back at the garden again, quietly turning the soil with a hand spade. The man moved like someone who didn't need an audience. 4 days had passed since I arrived, each one folding into the next without friction. Nathan never crossed into my space. He knocked before entering the hallway, asked nothing about my past, and didn't fill silences with meaningless chatter. He cooked, cleaned, repaired a broken drawer in the bathroom like it was a sacred duty. Yet something didn't sit right. It started with his tools. One afternoon, I reached under the sink to grab a sponge and spotted the toolbox he kept tucked there. Sleek, new stainless steel, Makita drills, Bosch laser levels, custom hex sets, nothing a regular part-time landscaper in this part of Oregon would throw cash at. Then there was the stove. It gleamed like something out of a luxury apartment magazine. I'd only seen one like it once in a showroom in Portland. $7,000, 0 cents minimum. High-end stainless steel, 6 burners, a griddle, even a warming drawer. It sat in the middle of our modest kitchen like a grand piano in a roadside diner. When I asked, he just glanced over his shoulder and said, "It came with the place, right?" And I came with a fairy tale. The next morning, I woke to the sound of a car starting earlier than usual. I peeked through the curtain. Nathan had traded his dusty pickup for a charcoal gray sedan, sleek and silent. He wore a button-down shirt and dark slacks, no tool belt, no dirt stains. He was gone before I could ask, and something in me stirred, restless. So I dressed quickly, tied back my hair, and slipped out 15 minutes later. I followed at a distance, careful not to get too close. The streets grew busier as we moved toward the heart of Portland. Victorian homes gave way to brownstones, which gave way to glass towers that mirrored the sky. He turned into the underground lot of a high-rise building I'd never noticed before. Sleek, all-black glass and metal edges. The kind of place where men in tailored suits drank $8.00 coffee and talked about hedge funds and hostile takeovers. I pulled up on the opposite sidewalk and waited, and then there he was, Nathan, my husband. He walked through the automatic doors like he belonged there. No toolbox, no work boots, just confidence and quiet. I stood frozen. What kind of landscaper walks into a building where people wear Rolexes and talk mergers? It felt like Clara's betrayal when she spread lies about my laziness to secure her promotion. The question stuck with me the entire ride home. I cooked dinner that night. Nothing special, just pan-fried chicken and green beans. I needed to keep my hands busy while my mind raced in circles. He came in late, smelled faintly of cologne, not sweat, but he greeted me with the same gentle nod, took off his shoes at the door like always. Over dinner, I finally broke the silence. "You said you fixed things." He paused, looked at me, waited. "What kind of things are in that building downtown?" His fork hovered midair, then, just as calmly, he set it down and offered a half-smile. "I fixed what people break when they forget what matters." That was it. No elaboration, no deflection either, just that. I didn't push. I just nodded and took another bite. That night, I lay awake a little longer than usual. I stared at the ceiling fan, listening to the soft hum of air moving above me. He didn't make sense. And maybe that's why I hadn't left. The world I came from always made sense. Cruelty passed down like heirlooms, silence mistaken for love, shame woven into every Sunday dress. But this was uneven. This man gave me a guest house, a $1,500 0-cent stove, shampoo with my name practically on it, yet never once asked me to give anything back. It made me feel strange. So when he handed me a cup of tea the next morning, I didn't hesitate. I smiled and said thank you. I didn't know what he was hiding, I thought, watching him sip his own quietly across the porch. But for once, I didn't want to run. I wanted to wait, though Nathan didn't stop me. He just leaned in the doorway that morning, arms folded, his eyes steady as always. "You don't owe them anything, Sophia." I zipped the side of my dress slowly, letting the words hang in the quiet room. "Maybe not," I said. "But I still want to believe they'll look me in the eye this time." He didn't nod, didn't shake his head either, just stepped aside and let me pass. The drive from Portland back to Boise, Idaho felt longer this time, though it was only 7 hours. My hands were cold against the steering wheel, even with the sun out. Nathan had offered to come with me. I told him no. "They said it's just a small celebration for my sister," I had explained. No need to make it a thing. But the moment I pulled up to the house, my childhood home, now freshly painted in a trendy soft gray with white shutters, I knew something wasn't right. There were 4 rental cars parked out front and a valet in a vest. A valet in Boise. I stepped inside, to music, clinking glasses, and the unmistakable scent of catered food. The furniture had been replaced, modern, white, cold. Gone were the doilies, the rocking chair, and the faded portraits of my grandparents. My mother saw me, or rather, she looked through me. "Oh," she said flatly. "There you are." There was no hug, no kiss on the cheek. She gestured vaguely toward the back patio. "They're all out there, try not to make an entrance. Try not to make an entrance." At an event I was invited to, it was like when Ruth told me to stay out of sight at Clara's graduation party to avoid embarrassing her. I walked through the living room. No one turned. No one said my name. One woman glanced at my shoes and whispered something to her friend. I held my small wrapped gift tighter. I'd spent the past week stitching a linen wall hanging for my sister, her favorite verse embroidered carefully by hand. I don't even remember what it said anymore, only that I chose the thread color to match the curtains from her old room. Outside, my sister stood near a glass table piled high with gift bags. Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Saks. I placed my handmade present beside them. It looked out of place, like I did. My sister turned, flicked her hair over one shoulder, and offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Huh! Didn't expect you to actually show." "I was invited," I said evenly. Technically, she was wearing white, as if this were her wedding and not just a celebration of her promotion. Someone handed her a champagne flute. She didn't offer me one. Eventually, the crowd hushed for the big reveal, a two-tiered cake covered in pink sugar roses. In gold script it read, "To our beautiful firstborn." I blinked. Just that? Not our daughters, not even her name, just firstborn. It stung like when Clara's name was the only one on our family's $10,000 0-cents donation plaque at church. My throat tightened, but I said nothing. Someone laughed. "Well, you're not the one people came to celebrate," my sister said sweetly, and a few nearby guests chuckled. I stepped back, bumping into a waiter. I mumbled an apology, though he barely noticed me. Later, one of my mother's old friends approached her near the punch bowl. She was smiling, nodding, holding a paper plate of cake. "You must be so proud of your daughters," she said. My mother didn't hesitate. "I only have one daughter, the other." She was a lesson we had to learn the hard way. It was the same rejection she'd voiced when she excluded me from her will, saying I'd never earn it. My body went still. I didn't drop my plate. I didn't storm out or yell. I just stood. The edges of the world muffled like I was underwater. I saw a teenager snap a photo with her phone. I heard the fizz of the soda fountain and the faint buzz of summer bugs outside. I carried my plate to the kitchen. Quiet, careful, set it in the sink and turned to leave. As I crossed the hall, I heard her voice again. My mother's low, but not soft. "She's just a charity case, you'll see. This won't last." Her words mirrored Clara's cruel whisper at my engagement announcement, calling me a temporary burden. The hallway blurred. My feet moved on instinct. I didn't know if I was shaking from rage or grief, but I knew I couldn't stay another second. I stepped into the cool air of the porch, leaving behind the lights, the laughter, the cake that never had my name. I didn't cry, but something inside me tore loose that night. The air in Boise was thick, but it was the silence back in Portland that felt heavier. When I got home, the porch light was still on. Nathan must have left it for me. I stepped inside quietly, like I didn't want the walls to hear me. The warmth that once greeted me felt like it had vanished, replaced by something too still, too polite. The kind of quiet that doesn't soothe, just reminds you how loud your thoughts can be. There's a silence that heals, I remember thinking. And then there's the kind that tells you you don't belong anywhere. I hung up my bag and went straight to the back room, not bothering to turn on the lamp. Nathan had left a folded blanket on the edge of the bed and a cup of tea, still warm. Chamomile, my favorite. He always remembered. I didn't drink it. That night, I didn't talk much. I didn't explain what had happened. Nathan didn't ask. Instead, he made dinner. Something simple. Grilled chicken, sweet potatoes, a salad with slices of peach. He placed the plate on the table without a word and sat across from me, reading something on his phone. "No questions, no performance. You didn't have to go," he said finally, not looking up. "I know," I replied. He stood, walked to the stove and poured the rest of the tea into the sink. "You don't have to explain anything, but you're not a ghost here. You can exist." That somehow made it worse, because if he had pushed, if he demanded answers, stormed the room, accused me of bringing old pain back into his calm life, I might have screamed. Instead, I just nodded and went to bed. I didn't sleep. I laid there with my eyes open, replaying every word from my mother's lips. "She's just a charity case, you'll see. This won't last." The next morning, I was folding the blanket back into place when Nathan tapped gently on the doorframe. "Invitation came for you," he said, holding a cream-colored envelope. "Well, for us, I think." It was heavy cardstock, thick and formal. "Dinner at the main house, Mr. Harrington, the owner. Friday at 7. "That's new," I said, frowning. "What's the occasion?" He shrugged. "No clue. Could be just neighborly politeness." I didn't answer right away. Friday came fast. I wore a dark green dress, not fancy, just neat. Nathan wore a blazer I hadn't seen before, charcoal gray and sharp across his shoulders. We walked across the lawn together, and for a moment I thought, maybe things are turning. The Harrington home was grand, not in a flashy way, but like old wealth. Polished wood, quiet servants, portraits that seemed to breathe. A woman in pearls opened the door. "Mr. Nathan," she said brightly, eyes flicking over to me. "Oh, we weren't expecting a +1. That pause, the kind that lands like a slap, just without the sound. My stomach tightened inside. As champagne flutes clinked and laughter bubbled from every corner, I drifted toward the back patio. I didn't want to hover. I just needed a moment. That's when I heard it. "She's just a guest, right?" a voice whispered behind a folding screen. "I mean, we only invited Mr. Nathan. She's not expected." I didn't stay to hear the rest. I found the powder room and locked the door. Stared at myself in the mirror, skin too pale under the lighting, eyes too tired, shoulders pulled tight like I was bracing for another blow. I pulled the handkerchief from my purse, the one with the stitched S, the only thing I had taken with me the day I left that church in Boise. "Am I invisible even here?" I whispered. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't throw anything, I didn't sob, but the tears came, and this time I let them. I sat on the floor, knees drawn up, and cried the way you do when there's nothing left to pretend. When the storm quieted, I fixed my face and walked out. Dinner continued like nothing had happened. I smiled, said thank you, clinked my glass. Later that night, back at the guest house, I stood by the sink washing off my makeup. When Nathan entered, I didn't turn around. "If you want a clean life," I said softly, "you can have it. I won't be the stain they warned you about." He said nothing. Not that night. But silence, I was learning, could hold more than just absence. Sometimes it held the weight of a decision not yet spoken. I didn't wait for his answer that night. After I said it, "I won't be the stain they warned you about," I just walked away into the bedroom, into the dark, into silence. But silence doesn't mean stillness. I didn't sleep. My body lay still, but my mind was pacing, questioning, reliving. That night wasn't heavy with sadness. It was bitter, sharp. By morning, the air outside had cooled. Spring in Portland carried this strange sweetness, like jasmine trying to grow through cement. I stood in the kitchen pouring coffee when Nathan walked in, buttoning the cuff of his sleeve. "You're up early," he said. "I don't sleep much lately." He reached for a banana, peeled it without looking at me. "There's a dinner tonight at the Harrington house. They asked if I'd bring someone." I turned skeptical. "They asked for me?" He paused. "They said +1. I said your name." I took a sip. "That's not the same." "No," he agreed. "But it's a start." That evening, I stood in front of the small mirror in our hallway and tied my hair back into a simple knot. No makeup, no ornaments, just the stitched handkerchief tucked neatly into the sleeve of my dress. Navy blue, plain but dignified. I didn't dress to impress anyone. I dressed to remind myself who I was. As we approached the estate, I felt my stomach tighten, not from fear, from clarity. They don't have to expect me to exist for me to take up space, I murmured. Nathan glanced over but said nothing, just held the door for me when we arrived. Inside, the same marble floors gleamed under soft chandeliers. A woman in a black dress rushed over, clipboard in hand. "Oh, thank goodness, Mr. Nathan," she chirped. We need someone to help plate the hors d'oeuvres. We're behind. She turned to me without even asking who I was and handed me a tray. Just arrange them neatly, napkin under each. I looked at Nathan, but he had been pulled aside by the host. I could have corrected her. I could have set the tray down, but I didn't. I took the tray, walked toward the kitchen, and arranged the shrimp canapes with deliberate care. Neat rows, small touches of parsley, everything balanced. If I'm serving, I whispered, I'll serve like a queen. I glided through the crowd, offering plates to men in cufflinks and women with diamonds. They barely looked at me. I didn't mind. The power of invisibility is that you hear everything. Halfway through the dinner, I heard the click of heels. A familiar gait, Clara. She entered like she was walking onto a stage, hair curled perfectly, a pearl set at her throat. She didn't glance at me, walked right past, her perfume blooming behind her like some expensive lie. Darlings, she beamed to the host's wife, you outdid yourselves. The host lifted his glass. To new beginnings, to healing, Clara toasted. I kept moving, plate in hand, silence in my chest. Then came the moment. Clara, reaching too far for a wine glass, tipped her flute. The red spilled across the tablecloth like a wound. People gasped softly. I stepped forward, pulling a clean napkin from the service tray. Here, I said, holding it toward her. She took it, eyes still on the mess. Oh, thank you, dear. I didn't move. You're welcome, Mom. The word hit like thunder, cracking through fine china. The room froze. She looked up, confused at first. Then recognition crept in, slow and stunned. Sophia. I smiled, calm, unapologetic. Still just a stain, right? I set the empty tray down on the table, turned and walked straight out the same door she came in. No one followed. Not even the air moved. The door clicked softly behind me, the only sound in the world that didn't feel like a slap. I didn't rush, I didn't cry. I didn't even look back. I walked past the tall hedges lining the Harrington estate like they were strangers. The night air smelled of magnolia and distance, thick and humid, but cleaner than the room I'd just left. By the time I reached the guest house, my phone buzzed, a text from Clara. You've embarrassed yourself enough, stay gone. It was the same venom she'd spat when I dared to ask for my share of Aunt Marion's $3,000 0 cents inheritance. I stared at it for a moment, not out of surprise, but because it was the fastest she'd ever responded to me in my life. I didn't reply. I didn't even breathe hard. I deleted it like someone brushing lint off a shirt. Nothing to hold on to. Nothing left to say. Nathan was already inside when I returned. He didn't ask questions, just poured tea, set the mug on the small table beside me, and sat quietly on the edge of the couch across the room. I was still standing when he finally spoke. You asked who I am, he said. I think you're ready now. He didn't say it with drama, just a quiet sort of readiness, like he'd been waiting for this moment long before I knew it was coming. I sat down, let the silence answer for me. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. My last name isn't Davis, he began. I blinked. What? It's Harrington. I felt something shift in my chest. Not panic, not even betrayal. More like a click, like a puzzle piece slipping into place. He continued. My mother owns Harrington Enterprises. Furniture, real estate, private equity. She wanted me to inherit it all. I said, no. He wasn't dramatic about it, no flexing, no showing off, just facts. It started my own company. Small, quiet, sustainable. I didn't want her name on it. I didn't want hers or mine, so I used Davis, my grandfather's name. I couldn't speak. The tea in my mug had gone cold. He looked at me carefully. I never told you because I didn't want to test you. I just wanted to be around someone who didn't see a bank account. And everyone else? I finally asked. He shrugged. They always wanted something. A position, a contract, a connection. His eyes softened. You were the first person who didn't ask me for anything except peace and space and maybe a little grace. I laughed, quiet, bitter at the edges. Well, I guess I failed that tonight. He shook his head. You didn't fail. You stood up. That's something most people never do. I sat back, still absorbing, and then I said it. The thing I didn't know I'd been holding in. Then it's time they hear my voice, too. He looked up, surprised. I stood, walked toward the little dresser by the window, pulled out the handkerchief, the one with the stitched S. I folded it neatly, slid it into my pocket. I have something to say, I said, and this time I'll be the one holding the mic. The next morning I woke early. The sky was still bruised with dawn. I tied my hair back, opened my laptop, and stared at the blinking cursor. I didn't wait for a sign. I typed. Subject, Harrington, Scholarship Fund. A statement from Sophia, I wrote. I didn't hold back. I told the truth, not just about Clara, but about girls like me. Girls told to disappear, told they were stains. I wrote about my wedding, the missing name on the cake, the silence, the rooms where I was present but never seen. I named names, carefully, calmly. I didn't slander. I documented. Then I listed 6 small community colleges and 12 rural schools with high dropout rates. I am not your daughter. I am your reminder, and I will make sure you remember me with every girl you tried to forget. I hit send. My hand didn't shake. It took less than 3 weeks for everything to shift. After I sent the email, silence lingered for a few days, long enough for me to wonder if I'd made a mistake. But then the messages started coming in. Principals, journalists, alumni. Some had read every word, some had only read the subject line, but they responded, and so did Nathan. One evening, just as the sun melted into the Portland skyline, he handed me a navy blue envelope, thicker than the others, the Harrington crest embossed in gold, an invitation, formal, polished. Harrington Foundation Annual Gala honoring legacy, elevating voices. Inside, my name wasn't printed at the bottom, it was at the top. Co-director. I looked up at him. He smiled softly. It's yours. Every part of it. I took a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Then I did what felt right. I got to work. By the time the night of the gala arrived, Portland shimmered in its spring glow. The event was held at the Riverside Conservatory, its glass dome glittering under string lights and the soft hum of chamber music. I stood outside for a moment, hand on the door, my clutch tight in my fingers. Inside it, my stitched handkerchief rested neatly, not for comfort anymore, but as a reminder. I stepped in. The room was a blur of velvet gowns, tuxedos, wine glasses raised mid-conversation, and yet, as I moved, something shifted. Eyes followed, mouths murmured. I wasn't the girl they'd ignored at dinner parties. I wasn't just a wife or the charity case. I was something else now, something they hadn't prepared for. At the far end, Clara stood near the stage, her voice lilting through practiced laughter. She wore red as always, like she thought she had to announce her power before entering a room. She spotted me for a moment and blinked, quickly turned back to her circle. The announcement came a few minutes later. Nathan walked up to the podium, crisp in a charcoal suit. No notes, no script. I've been part of this foundation in silence for years, he began. But tonight, I want to introduce the person who's been writing its next chapter. A pause. She's been called a mistake, a stain, a burden. But tonight, she holds the pen. He turned, reached out. Sophia Harris. I stepped onto the stage with the weight of every insult, every dismissal, every empty room I'd been erased from. Beneath my heels, but I didn't carry them. I walked over them. The mic felt cool under my fingers. The room quieted the moment I exhaled. I want to thank those who never believed in me, I began. You made me sharper. You made me listen when silence could have drowned me. I scanned the room. My past doesn't vanish. It's sewn into me like a thread through every dress I wasn't allowed to choose. Every meal I served when I was supposed to be seated. Someone near the back shifted uncomfortably. Another lowered their glass. But I'm still here. For every girl told she belongs in the background, for every daughter who's told to hush, I want to say this. You belong wherever you decide to stand. The room paused. Then it broke. Applause real and rising. People stood. Some clapped harder than others. But it didn't matter. They were facing me now. When I stepped off the stage, Clara was waiting. Arms folded, chin high, voice sharp. So you came to flaunt your husband's money. I didn't flinch. I reached into my clutch, pulled out the ring Nathan had given me, the one I hadn't worn in public since the wedding. I slipped it on right there in front of her. I came to return what was always mine. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I walked past her. Before leaving the stage entirely, I paused, removed the stitched handkerchief from my bag, and draped it gently across the microphone. I didn't need it anymore, and this time, when the spotlight followed me, I didn't flinch. I woke before the birds, not because something was wrong, just because for the first time in my life, my body didn't brace for the day ahead. There was no ache behind my eyes, no pit in my stomach. No need to rehearse answers to questions no one had ever cared to ask me. Just quiet. Not the kind that weighs heavy on your chest, the kind that breathes with you, the kind that says, "You're safe now." I stretched under the soft cotton sheets and listened. The wind outside stirred the trees lazily. A kettle whistled. Nathan was up, humming in the kitchen. Off-key but familiar, like the way some people misspell your name but still mean love when they say it. I pulled the curtain slightly. Sunlight eased through like a warm hand. My eyes lingered on the small garden patch by the porch where the tomatoes were finally beginning to fruit. This isn't a fairy tale ending. I whispered into the stillness. It's something better. It's mine. While Nathan prepared breakfast, I wandered toward the old oak table by the window. A stack of envelopes waited. Some invitations, some congratulations, and then one thinner than the rest, bearing the crest of a university I hadn't thought about in years. Hand steady, I tore it open. Dear M.S. Harris, we are pleased to inform you of your admission into the Part-Time Education Foundation's program, fall term. My breath caught. I hadn't let myself hope. Not really. I'd applied on a dare, a private one, whispered to myself at 3:00 a.m. one night after rereading my old journals. They'd said I was too late, too old, too average, but I knew now. I'd never been average. I'd just been silenced. Nathan walked in with 2 mugs, one for him, dark and bold, one for me, lighter, with honey. He glanced at the paper in my hand. That it? I nodded, the corners of my mouth rising slowly. And then, of course, it buzzed. My phone, hidden in the kitchen drawer most days now. I picked it up, already sensing the weight on the other end before I saw the name. Clara. I stared at the screen long enough for it to stop ringing, but it lit up again and again. This time, I answered. Her voice crackled not just through the speaker, but as if it had traveled through too much pride, too many years of not listening. I heard your speech, she said. No greeting. I didn't know you could speak like that. I sipped my tea. I always could. You just never listened. It was the same dismissal she'd given when I'd tried to share my $1,000 0-cents teaching grant win, saying it was insignificant next to her achievements. Silence. I was wrong. She finally said it wasn't an apology, it was a confession. And for the first time, I did twist myself into forgiving. I didn't reach across the line she'd refused to cross my whole life. That's not mine to fix, I said. I've already chosen healing. Before she could answer, I ended the call. Not out of cruelty, but clarity. Some things don't need to be held anymore. Some weights aren't yours. That afternoon, I packed a bag and headed to campus. Orientation wasn't for another month, but I wanted to see it. Touch the place I'd fought so long to believe I was worthy of. Outside the building, students moved quickly. Backpacks, lattes, earbuds. They looked young, half restless, half hopeful. I stood there, not trying to fit in, just breathing. A young man with a clipboard passed by, glanced at my badge and smiled. "Professor Harris?" I laughed gently. "Not yet," he nodded. "Well, soon." I looked down at my hand. The ring still glinted in the afternoon light, but what grounded me wasn't gold. It was the folded handkerchief still tucked in my coat pocket. The same one they gave me on a day meant to bury me. The same one I carried when I decided to rise. It wasn't about them anymore. I walked toward the entrance, steps even, shoulders back, because sometimes being forced into silence teaches you how to listen to your own truth. They said I belonged at the bottom, in the shadows, behind the scenes. But I found out I belonged exactly where I choose to rise, and that's where the story begins.